What sounds like fiction but is actually a real historical event? When King Edward I was young, before he was king, he was a prisoner of Simone de Montfort during a civil war. During his captivity he asked to ride the horses at the castle where he was being held. He proceeded to ride them one by one, tiring them all out. When it came to the last horse he mounted, bade his captors farewell and rode away. All of the other horses were too tired to give effective chase. Wow, that reads right out of a novel written to teach young readers about cleverness or something. The marathon at the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis. The first-place finisher did most of the race in a car. He had intended to drop out, and got a car back to the stadium to get his change of clothes. And just kind of started jogging when he heard the fanfare. The second-place finisher was carried across the finish line, legs technically twitching, by his trainers. They had been refusing him water, and giving him a mixture of brandy and rat poison for the entire race. Doping wasn't illegal yet, and this was a terrible attempt at it. So he got the gold when the first guy was revealed. Third finisher was unremarkable, somehow. Fourth finisher was a Cuban mailman, who had raised the funds to attend the Olympics by running non-stop around his entire country. He landed in New Orleans, and promptly lost all of the traveling money on a riverboat casino. He ran the race in dress shoes and long trousers cut off at the knee by a fellow competitor with a knife. He probably would have come in first, second, behind the car, had it not been for the hour nap he took on the side of the track after eating rotten apples he found on the side of the race. Ninth and 12th finishers were from South Africa, and ran barefoot. South Africa didn't actually send a delegation, these were students who just happened to be in town and thought it sounded fun. Ninth was chased a mile off course by angry dogs. Note, these are the first Africans to compete in any modern Olympic event. Half the participants had never raced competitively before. Some died. St. Louis only had one water stop on the entire run. This, coupled with the dusty road, and exacerbated by the cars kicking up dust, lead to the above fatalities. And yet, somehow, rat poison guy survived to get the gold. The Russian delegation arrived a week late, because they were still using the Julian calendar. In 1904, seriously, this needs to be a movie. If this sounds familiar, I'm reposting myself. This sounds like some Monty Python-esque. The return of Napoleon, an army was sent to intercept him, and they ended up fighting for him. If it were shown in a movie, most people would have considered it cheesy and unrealistic. In 496 BC, the army of King Goujian of Yu put 3 ranks of criminals in the front of their battle formation. Their task was to impress the enemy with their ferocity and commitment by chopping off their own heads as soon as battle was joined. The tactic was a success. While their opponents from the state of Wu were recovering from their astonishment, they were overrun by the rest of the Yu army. The convicts, who were condemned men anyway, had been coerced by the threat that if they didn't comply with this plan their families would be executed also. Stephen Fry on QII think cutting off one's own head is pretty unlikely. But they might have slit their own throats. The Great Stink of London in 1858. One summer the heat dried up the River Thames, where all the human waste went, and an unbearable smell pervaded throughout the entire city. All Parliament representatives were eventually coerced out of their homes outside of London to convene and solve the issue. Much to the citizens' glee, Parliament was held in their building on the bank of the River Thames, resulting in one of the fastest Parliament decisions ever made to reform the London sewer system. Edit, grammar. And the guy they had designed the system did it so well. The bulk of his planning is still in place today, with modern improvements. Closing parenthesis. Vesna Volovic fell from a height of 10,160 meters and lived. She holds the world record for surviving the highest fall without a parachute. Simo Heiha during the Winter Wars. Dude was straight out of a modern FPS game. He had 505 confirmed kills. So that's just the number they can prove. It may be even more than that. He became known as the White Death since he'd wait in the snow for hours at a time and Russian soldiers would just get shot out of nowhere. The man was absolutely insane. He literally ate snow to stop his breath from fogging, being seen. He also survived the war, and just went back home and lived a long life. The many defenestrations of Prague. Starting a war by throwing diplomats out the window is almost straight out of 300. I am glad that the outside world remembers smiley face. Sky pirates. During World War I, German Zeppelins would board and search foreign ships. And the boarding party of the L-23 once captured the Norwegian three-masted cargo schooner Royal by bluffing the crew with a flare gun after they accidentally dropped their machine gun into the sea while lowering from their airship. So you're saying the world had airship pirates then? Damn, missed my life's work by 100 years or so. The Japanese kamikaze divine wind that saved the country from an amphibious invasion by the Mongolian hordes. The Mongols captured a foothold on some outlying Japanese islands and started to attack the mainland. The Japanese army pushed them back, and they had to retreat to China. When they did, a typhoon ravaged their navy and sank their ships. The Mongolians, probably reasonably seeing this as a fluke, decided to rebuild and attack again. 7 years later, unfortunately for them, the Japanese fortified their coastline. After basically months of sailing around seeking a place to land, another typhoon struck their fleet and destroyed them. There would be no third invasion. Some guy in Australia decided he wanted to hunt rabbits, but rabbits don't live in Australia, so then he released like 12 in his backyard, and now there's a ton of rabbits in Australia. The owner and bartender of a bar once tried to take out an insurance policy on one of their alcoholic customers with one of their friends. In an attempt to make some fast cash, they immediately opened his tab up, hoping he would drink himself to death. That didn't work, so they began spiking his unlimited drinks with antifreeze. That didn't work, so they decided to pump carbon monoxide into his apartment one night. He still wouldn't die. They then beat him savagely and put him in the back of their car to bury him in a rural area. Halfway out there, they heard noises coming from the trunk of the car. He still hadn't died, and when they stopped and got him out, he began walking away under his own power. It took 3 times being hit with a car to finally kill him. That man may be the closest thing we've ever had to a superhero. What's super f***ed up is that the cure to antifreeze poisoning is drinking alcohol. The fire in Dublin, Ireland on June 18, 1875. A fire broke out and spread to a malt house, and the heat broke open every alcohol barrel and flooded the streets with it. The people of Dublin decides to drink the burning alcohol that is spreading in the streets. Filled with litter and debris and was literally on fire. 13 people died not from the fire or smoke but from alcohol poisoning they got from drinking the street whiskey. In the 1800s there were street vendors in Egypt who sold ancient Egyptian mummies. Just lined them up on a street corner and sold them like they were umbrellas on a rainy day. English tourists would buy them to display as oddities. The fact that after Napoleon's exile in 1814 he went round France again, rallying all the armies that had been sent to kill him, and declared war on the rest of Europe again. All within 100 days. The entire Taiping Rebellion. A war started by a Chinese peasant who dreamed and believed he was Jesus' younger brother. Although poor, the first thing he did was have a giant demon-slaying sword forged. Took over a city. Asked the British why they wouldn't pay him tribute as the new head of their faith. Engaged in total war with the Qing. Applied Sejua communist policies like abolishing private property. Separated women and men from ever interacting. And sent the women to the front lines. Over 20 million people died. With some estimates as high as 40 million. It was the 4th deadliest conflict in human history. It killed more people than World War I. Only World War II, transition of the Ming, and Qing conquest of the Ming were deadlier. Ted Bundy escaped from custody twice. The first by jumping out of a 3-story building. Second time by taking a guard's outfit and walking out the front door. The second time was after he broke the light fixture in his cell and crawled into the officer's apartment above. Thank you for clarifying. And that's after he starved himself down to size. A Finnish soldier, who managed to escape capture after losing his squad in a methed-up hallucination. Being the doctor of the group, he was carrying the meth pills for the whole squad. And in order to survive and escape his pursuers, he took the whole pill box. 30 pills. When the allowed dosage for a grown man was 1. He survived in the Soviet wilderness for 2 weeks, eating only pine buds and one time a Siberian jay that he caught and ate raw. When he was rescued he was 45 kilograms and had a resting heart rate of 200 BPM. There was that time Austrian hussars got some schnapps on their way to attack to Ottomans. Got drunk, and fought their own infantry over access to the schnapps. In the multilingual confusion someone shouted, "The Turks," which caused widespread panic and a full retreat by both the cavalry and infantry. Officers shouting "Halt" in German sounded to their non-Austrian allies like they were shouting "Allah," which only deepened the confusion. As they retreated into the rest of the Austrian army, those commanders also thought it was a Turkish attack and ordered artillery to fire into the oncoming men. That was the story of the Austrians routing their own army because of schnapps. Known as the Battle of Karansebes. According to Wikipedia, there are estimates of 1,200 casualties. The Glasgow Ice Cream Wars: 6 people died in a turf war over ice cream van routes. They were dealing heroin out of the vans. A tornado helped the U.S. in the War of 1812 during the Battle of D.C. A freak patch of dense fog saved the colonies during the Revolutionary War. Similarly, hurricane saves Japan from being invaded by the Mongols twice. Hence, kamikaze, divine wind. Operation Starfish Prime reads like science fiction. Back in 1962, USA pondered what would happen if you detonated a nuclear warhead in outer space, so they did just that. The result was an EMP that made the test instruments go off scale, so it was difficult getting accurate measurements. In Hawaii, almost 900 miles away, the EMP knocked out 300 streetlights. After the detonation of Starfish Prime, several bright auroras could be observed, greater than the visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense. A very large area of the Pacific was illuminated by the auroral phenomena. From far south of the South Magnetic Conjugate Area Tongatapu through the burst area to far north of the North Conjugate Area French Frigate Shoals. At twilight after the burst, resonant scattering of light from lithium and other debris was observed at Johnston and French Frigate Shoals for many days, confirming the long-time presence of debris in the atmosphere. An interesting side effect was that the Royal New Zealand Air Force was aided in anti-submarine maneuvers by the light from the bomb. Declassified in 2015 from what I read. F. The rise and fall of Alexander the Great. Never lost a battle in his life. Conquered the whole known world. And only stopped because his soldiers were tired. And then died of the flu when he was like 32. Honestly, his life should be a vaccine commercial no matter how great you are. Vaccines will save your life. Single quote. A Chinese emperor once ran in circles around a pillar to escape an assassin. He survived. That wasn't just a Chinese emperor. That was Qin Shi Huang. Before he united China and became the first emperor in all its history. In 2007, a paraglider got trapped in the updraft of 2 joining thunderstorms and lifted to an altitude of 10 kilometers. She landed 3.5 hours later about 60 kilometers north of her starting position, having survived extreme cold, lightning and lack of oxygen. A town in France nearly danced itself to death in 1518 because of a dancing plague. There were a few Japanese soldiers who refused to surrender after World War II and remained on duty in the rainforest for 30 years after the war ended. During World War I, the Germans sent Lenin back to Russia in a sealed train, calling him the most dangerous weapon that they had. Greater than Senta helped him return is a better description. He wanted to return. The Second Punic War has all the makings of a great story. It has a blood oath, an underdog story, bravery, an op main character, tragedy, and a final showdown between the 2 main characters. The fact that it all, or most of it, happened blows my mind. There could be a godlike series about the 3 wars, trying to move some elephants over a couple of mountain ranges. In 1967, Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt simply vanished without a trace and no one knew what happened for 40 years. What happened? He went swimming and was never seen again. His death was officially ruled a drowning in 2005. The Australians named a swimming centre after him. The longest piano piece of any kind is Vexations by Erik Satie. It consists of a 180-note composition which, on the composer's orders, must be repeated 840 times so that the whole performance is 18 hours 40 minutes. Its first reported public performance in September 1963, in the Pocket Theatre, New York City, required a relay team of 10 pianists. The New York Times critic fell asleep at 4 a.m., and the audience dwindled to 6 masochists. At the conclusion, one sadomasochist shouted, "Encore!"